So welcome everyone. Thanks for attending. My name is Siobhan Murphy and I'm a Planning and Implementation Manager with Pearson Canada. So just a few kind of reminders on the slide. If you're just joining and you haven't had a chance to read through, you are in listen only mode. So if, just so that the sound quality, and that we have no feedback. So just so you're aware of that. So if you have any questions as we go through the webinar, please just feel free to use the chat box and type your questions. I will do some questions at the end as well. So, but if you have ones as we're going through the webinar, please feel free to put them in and I'll address them as they come up. If we don't have an answer to your questions, one of our representatives will be happy to reach out to you after the webinar. And just so you're aware, this webinar is being recorded. So you will receive a recording for signing up. So thanks again for joining us today. Just to give you a little bit of a background of what our time will look like together, we will start with a little bit about looking briefly at core values and kind of how Fountas and Pinnell classroom kind of came to be. And then we'll spend some time briefly looking at the responsive teaching cycle and how that kind of leads into what we do every day in our literacy classroom and our literacy time. And from there, we're going to spend the bulk of our time exploring the instructional context within Fountas and Pinnell classroom. And finally, then we'll just do some quick next steps and wrap up and save some time for any questions that you might have as we go through. And Daniel will be monitoring the chat. So like I said, feel free to post any questions or comments in there. All right, so I wanted to just start with some core values. I think it's important to kind of just build that understanding about where kind of Fountas and Pinnell are coming from, and knowing that, you know, all of their literacy resources that they've created to date are really built on a strong foundation of core values that they have that are really all about literacy education and how that affects students. And so what are those key things that need to be in place? So I wanted to just put this up here for a chance for you to see what they value in literacy education, and also to give you a chance to think about what are your core values when you think about literacy instruction. And this is just really important, I think, to kind of reflect on so that you can think about your core values and how that really builds a strong foundation for instruction and goals and a plan within your classroom, within your schools, and within your school division. So as you see these core values on your screen right now, if there's any that you really identify with, or key words that are on the screen that you really can identify with, if you would just post them in the chat, that would be great. Or any other core values that you believe that may not be listed on here. We'd love for you to share your thinking around that and your feedback. So I'll just give you about 20 or 30 seconds or so to kind of read through, and again, post anything in the chat, whether it's a number of one of the core values listed or any of your core values around literacy education. All right, and if you are listening to this as a recording, this may be a good time to stop and pause and have a conversation with your colleagues, again, around words that they connected with or core values that they hold in regards to literacy. So we'll get going from here. And this slide here, you're probably familiar with many of these resources that are on the screen, but you'll see that Fountas and Pinnell have obviously assessment tools such as benchmark assessment, intervention tools such as level literacy intervention, and then the everyday classroom literacy teaching tools as in Fountas and Pinnell classroom. Now what you'll notice on this slide is that they are all bound together by that common resource, the literacy continuum, and this is the new expanded edition. And you'll actually find this, if you have benchmark assessment in your schools, you'll actually see this resource included in the benchmark assessment system box. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to highlight this is just for you to kind of get the sense of, you know, how Fountas and Pinnell classroom kind of came to be. So obviously they've had their benchmark assessment and level literacy intervention out for a while, and people were requesting for supports for what do you do every day in your literacy classroom to provide quality, high quality resources and instruction for students. And so that's kind of where Classroom kind of came out of, and that need for people wanting to have quality, high quality resources for a comprehensive literacy structure in their classroom. The continuum, I will just let you know, is meant to be used as a tool. So it's not really meant to be read cover to cover per se, but you know, as you're using it and you're noticing and observing students as they're reading and working through literacy, this is a great tool to go through and look at what are some of those key areas. And so it also helps teachers not only in planning, but also in selecting text for various purposes. So for interactive read-alouds, shared reading, could be book clubs as well. And of course, guided reading. Within the continuum, there are 8 continua, and they are organized by grade, except for the guided reading section. So that's actually organized by reading level. But really the whole idea is that this resource is kind of used as that roadmap to develop coherence across classrooms, grades, districts, and really get everyone teaching in the same direction, so that as teachers are assessing and observing students, they're able to support all students, and including our striving readers who might also be in intervention in everyday classroom instruction. So you'll see here that the foundation of Fountas and Pinnell Classroom is really, as I mentioned, built on the literacy continuum. There's also another key resource that comes up frequently and has, if you haven't seen it yet, it's the guided reading responsive teaching across the grades. And this is an excellent resource for really looking at the emphasis when they Fountas and Pinnell talk about responsive teaching. This really talks about how do we support responsive teaching in the classroom and those moment-to-moment decisions that teachers need to make as they observe and analyze students' literacy behaviors. It also provides ideas for a multi-text approach to teaching and working as a community of learners within the classroom. It walks teachers through examples of students and teacher interactions and what those could look like, as well as how we support students in such diverse classrooms, including supporting English language learners and making sure that all students become global citizens. So if you haven't checked out that resource, it's a great one to have a peek through. And if you are familiar with these, you can use the chat feature and just type in LC for Learning Continuum or GR for Guided Reading, just to kind of let us know, are these resources that you're currently using in your schools, in your classrooms? So that brings us to the next slide here, where we talk a little bit about responsive teaching, because really the whole idea of Classroom is we want to make sure that we're observing students so that can really inform next steps in instruction. So there's many tools that you can use to do that. Obviously one being gathering data in some form, but obviously one being benchmark assessment. You could have other tools that you're using. But the whole idea is that we want to observe students as they're reading, as they're writing, and really focus in on what are those behaviors that they're exhibiting and what things do they have a lot of strengths in, and where are some of their areas where we can provide more supports. And so as we do that, we think about that system of strategic action wheel when we're thinking about the reading behaviors. And that leads us then into the continuum. And so we can start to focus on maybe 2 or 3 goals for that student, or areas that we really want to focus on, those key behaviors and understandings that we really want to notice, teach, and support. And from there, we can use that to inform the everyday literacy instruction that takes place, and use tools such as Fountas and Pinnell Classroom to really support those students in engaging in those strategic actions. Questions or comments, please feel free again to post those in the chat. Daniel's monitoring it for me, so I'm happy to address anything as it comes up. So these are the instructional contexts that currently make up Fountas and Pinnell Classroom. So you'll see that there's interactive read aloud, shared reading, reading mini lessons, phonics, spelling, and word study, guided reading, book clubs, and independent reading. And all of these instructional contexts, you'll notice as we start to take a little bit of a deeper dive into them that they're really put together in a coherent way. So students have multiple opportunities to access age-appropriate texts and engage in meaningful literacy instruction in whole group settings, small group settings, individual opportunities, and really move their learning forward. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to play a little bit of a video clip. We likely won't get to all of it, but I'm going to play some of it just for you to kind of get a little bit of a snapshot of some of these instructional contexts and what they look like as they're being delivered in the classroom. I'm just going to click this link and it should direct us to a video. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it. Just let Daniel know in the chat if you can't hear any sound.
When Elizabeth did her chores, she also tied Eva onto her back with a kanga. Mama had to help a little. Why do we think Elizabeth keeps doing what her mama's doing? What do you think? Mooney?
Because she wants to learn how to take care of babies.
What do you do with a nose like this? Which animals do you think these noses belong to?
No, no, he said. An elephant looks like a tree.
It's a bear! Go through the mud puddle, swish, splash, go through the river, splish, splash.
Harry, what do you think the author wants you to think about rainforest?
I want you to think about how beautiful is the rainforest and how good it is.
The word come. Would this go on the cat or scent side?
Cat.
The word circus.
Scent.
Boys and girls, we've been looking at a lot of words, and today we're going to use our names to notice that words are made up of letters. Make sure you're looking at the letters on your yellow folder. Good mix and fix, my friend.
I have 2 A's and 2 L's in my name, but I only have 1 Y.
How can you tell, or what do you notice in the illustration that tells you that they feel happy?
Because they have pink cheeks.
He lives in a house. I also heard a friend say
What he eats.
Pancake.
I'm going to have you go to page 10 and 11. Tell me what season you think it might be in this page. Ava?
Spring.
It's spring. How can you tell, Julie?
Like the forest, it's not like snow, there isn't snow anywhere, but that is adorable.
A little baby monkey. They are cute.
This tail keeps an animal from flying.
Does that make sense? Try that again.
This tail keeps an animal from flying.
There you go. That makes more sense than flying, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What else was funny about that present?
Chester thinks someone's name Guess Who, but nobody's names can be Guess Who.
All right, boys and girls, take the letters you have in front of you and make the word me.
Me.
Charlotte, what picture did you choose?
Hen.
What does hen rhyme with?
10.
Let's all say that together. 10, hen.
Why do you think that Max was using his imagination?
Because he doesn't want to be bored in his room. She laughed because she remembers when she started roller skating in the house. She started laughing and she thought, why am I listening to this?
At the beginning, we said we were going to practice taking turns and looking at each other when we were talking. How do you think we did with taking turns today?
Great.
You think we did great?
Extreme great.
What book do you have there?
Our stars.
Ooh, how come you picked this book to read?
Because I wanted to learn more about our solar system and our stars.
So tell me some things you've learned.
I learned that Venus looks like a star sometimes, but it's not really a star. It's a planet, the planet Venus.
Did anybody else have a cranky part of their body? Let's take a peek. Oh,
The cat.
you did? What part of the cat's?
The tail, and it just stuck up like a stick.
Why was the bone your favorite?
Because, like, he acts all crazy, like he digs every single hole in the whole yard to find his bone.
Would your dog do that?
No,
No?
my dog is trained.
Hopefully you got a chance to see that on your end and you could hear the sound. Just a one-word summary. So as you watch that, what word came to mind as you watch those students engaging in the different instructional contexts? You can just post it in the chat. That would be great. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna explore the 7 instructional contexts that we just watched the quick video clip on. And I'm just gonna kind of give you a rundown of, you know, what makes up that instructional context and just a tiny bit of information on each one. We are offering more specific webinars, and I'll talk to that at the end if there's an area that you would like to revisit in more detail. So the interactive read aloud is the first one that we're going to explore. So this actually has 120 titles per grade, K to 6. And within there, the interactive read alouds are actually organized in text sets. So there's approximately 4 to 5 books that make up a text set. And within each text set, there's actually an inquiry overview card. And so that's an opportunity for students to think about how all these books within that text set are connected together. And the nice thing about the inquiry card is that within the text set is that it addresses an essential question. And so some of the examples of the essential questions are, why are numbers important? Being part of a community. Those are the kinds of things. So a lot of links to other subject areas. And so that students are starting to make those connections outside of just their literacy time, but into social, into science, and those kinds of areas, and other things that are important in the lives of students. So obviously essential questions are age appropriate. The other thing that the overview card does is it connects for the teacher ideas around how those texts are connected, but then also provides some projects and discussion around that essential question. So as you finish a text set, there's some projects that students can engage in and discussion that they can engage in as well. For every book that's part of Interactive Read Aloud, there is also a lesson folder card per title, and that walks the teacher through the lesson that makes up the Interactive Read Aloud. And so through the Interactive Read Aloud, teachers are able to model fluent reading. Oftentimes they are books that are probably at higher levels and the students are able to read on their own. So it's good because there's a lot of teacher support. It's helping to build the background knowledge of students. I am just going to quickly show you what the lesson folder looks like. So I do have some images here. Some of them are a little bit small, and I've enlarged key areas of them so that you can see them a little bit more clearly. If you are interested in actually taking a look at a sampler, we do have many posted on our website, or you can connect with our sales team to be able to get a physical sampler and take a peek at it. So here you'll notice that this is a grade 1 lesson, and there are 4 books in this text set. And what you'll notice, and the part I want to highlight, is that the goals link back to the continuum. So remember at the beginning we talked about how the continuum is really that foundational or that roadmap that guides everything that happens in Fountas Classroom. And so the goals come directly from there. So you'll see that as you're reading through this text, there are goals around inquiry, comprehension, communication, and vocabulary, just to name a few examples for this particular book. There's also some information about the book provided on the lesson folder card, as well as ideas for the teacher to introduce, read the text, discuss the text, and as they're discussing it, it comes and talks, or it builds around the whole idea of those strategic actions. So it always comes back to linking it back to strategic actions, the thinking within, beyond, and about the text. So again, building that common language with your colleagues in your buildings, but also most importantly for the students. And so it gives many suggestions that teachers can use. Obviously they're book specific. And so teachers can really be responsive to the needs of their students, because based on what they're observing with their students, they can choose what might be a good question to ask, or what area might be worth exploring in a little bit more detail. So lots of suggestions provided in the lesson folder card. The other thing that it does to support teachers is making sure that we're thinking about our English language learners. And so within each part of the lesson, you'll notice that there's supports for English language learners. Here's an example of one that's when you're reading the text, how you might support English language learners during that part of the lesson. And then as we go on to the next part of the lesson, these students here are now responding to the text. So what it does, if you're familiar with LLI, there's always an image, visual about what a response could look like. And so here's a visual of, you know, a typical response that could be from a grade 1 student. So here's an example. And the students in this part of the lesson are responding to the text. Now, I've just kind of zoomed in on the interactive writing and art, but the students could be also responding through bookmaking or through role playing. What you'll notice as well is that, again, there's supports provided for English language learners in this part of the lesson that's specific to the responding to text. And then here, as we reread and revisit the text and connect to other books and assess the learning, again, what types of supports are we providing for English language learners, and also for, you know, all students in our classroom that might be good modifying or scaffolding of instruction so that they can really participate and use language in the discussions, as well as benefit from the teaching that's happening. So lots of in the moment support for teachers. And that's what we hear a lot of, teachers who say, I don't really feel confident in literacy. This gives them that support to know what might I be doing next, or what might I be looking for as we go through this lesson, and what am I observing, and what are the goals of the lesson. So the next component from there that we're going to take a peek at is shared reading. And within shared reading, the whole idea is, of course, we want to engage students in reading texts along with us. So of course, we're going to do the first reading and then get the students to join in with us and really just build that enjoyment of reading. It gives us a chance and another opportunity to model and demo the reading processes and support students as they work through that system of strategic actions. So that thinking within, beyond, and about the text. It also helps when we talk about phonics and building letter knowledge and phonemic awareness and understanding letter and sound relationships. So lots of opportunities to engage students through shared reading. What you'll notice is that there are big books. So there is over 200 titles with lesson folders and audiobooks pre-K through 3. In the older grades, it looks a little bit different. It's in large text from interactive READ-ALOUD guided reading and book clubs. You also receive 6 copies of the book of the title in little book format, so that students can revisit that book on their own or in small groups. Because you have access to the audio file, you can also set up a listening center in your class. So as you finish those shared reading books, they may be part of a listening center that students can revisit and listen to those books again. Again, if you have any questions about any of these instructional contexts, please post them in the chat, and I'll be able to address them hopefully as we go. Reading mini lessons. So this is another instructional context that you saw in the video clip. And within here, the students, the reading mini lessons are organized into 4 different umbrellas. So they're actually organized, and these run from grades K to 6. They're organized by management, literary analysis, strategies and skills, and writing about reading. And so in there, you'll notice that there's the opportunity for the teacher to deliver a mini lesson, and then the students to obviously apply what they're learning. You'll see in the in the image there, the teacher's creating an anchor chart with the students. So for each mini lesson, there's visuals there, so you can create anchor charts with students. The mentor texts are referenced in the materials for the lesson. So we're getting students to think about what do good writers do and modeling that. And when we're reading, what do good readers do when they process text and think about reading? So lots of opportunities there to, again, get back to that engaging literature that's part of Fountas Pinnell Classroom. Phonics spelling and word study. So in this context, students are looking at oral language and how written language works. They actually get to receive, or with phonics spelling and word study, many tools and resources, one being the comprehensive phonics spelling and word study guide. And you can see an image there on the slide. And this guide is a companion to what is in the literacy continuum. So the literacy continuum has a section on phonics spelling and word study, and more detailed information is found in this companion, this word study guide. And within there, you'll be able to see ideas for mini lessons. So within phonics spelling and word study, and in that instructional context, there is a whole set of lessons then that come from the comprehensive phonics spelling and word study guide. And that's the way it's set up. The ready-made resources are included with it, as well as many online tools are available as well. But what happens in this instructional context is that you offer some explicit instruction in phonics spelling and word study, but then it's also woven back into the other instructional context. So students have an opportunity to get a mini lesson on those key principles within that time. They also have an opportunity to apply their thinking and their learning. Could be small group, could be individually, and then revisit and apply their learning in other instructional contexts. So again, it comes back to talking about that cohesiveness and the coherent structure of how Fountas Pinnell Classroom is built. Again, there's 100 lessons per grade K to 3, just over 100 in grade 4. They're currently working on grade 5. It's the publication date is the end of August this year, and then they'll work on grade 6. And again, if you have any questions, just please post in the chat. Guided reading. So this one is the same sort of setup where the other instructional context, where in that you're receiving a lesson folder per title. There's over 1,300 titles spanning grades K to 6. These are books that are unique to Fountas Pinnell Classroom. So they're not part of their other, collections that you may have purchased in the past, such as, LLI. Obviously, this is an instructional context meant for everyday classroom use. So these are new books, new lessons. This instructional context is obviously leveled appropriately on the Fountas Pinnell text gradient. And so within this lesson, again, the goals come from the continuum, just like they do for every other instructional context. You're working with students at those challenging texts, so you can just move their learning a little bit further, but of course they have that teacher support. And again, a lot of pedagogical support within the lessons. And that's what people really, really love about the guided reading. They feel like they're really supported. Sometimes that's a tricky one to kind of roll out in a classroom, but there's lots of teacher support. Again, when we're discussing the text, it's linking back to those system of strategic actions and that thinking within, beyond, and about the text, as well as supports for our English learners in the classroom. And here you receive 6 copies of each title, so that you can have up to 6 students in your guided reading lesson if you choose. Book clubs, that's the next section. So here with book clubs, this is a really good opportunity for students to build their language and their thinking around text. So in this instructional context, students are choosing which books that they're going to read as part of a book club. They are organized in text sets, so there's, you can have some whole group discussion about the books that the students are reading. You can see on the slide there that there's 32 titles for grades K to 3 and 48 for grades 4 to 6. And then there's a discussion card provided for the teacher to use for each set or for each title within the book club and literature discussions. So again, lots of opportunities for students to be talking about their reading and their thinking, and to work with their peers in that context. Independent reading. So this is another opportunity for students to make some choice in what they're reading. You can see on the slide the number of titles that come at the various grades. This also includes a conferring card for the teacher. So as you're working with the students, you are able to look at the conferring card and get a sense of some specific teaching points or conversations in conferences that you might have with students. And you saw that on the video where the teacher was talking to the students about their reading and getting them to share their thinking about the book that they're reading through. So again, lots of popular trade titles here, and students have a lot of choice so that they're engaged in what they're reading, and lots of high quality literature included. So I wanted to kind of come back to this visual and kind of pull everything together before our time ends today. But what you'll notice here is the whole idea of Fountas and Pinnell Classroom, it's really that design for responsive teaching. And so you'll see that there's opportunities for teachers to work with students in the classroom in whole group settings, small group settings, individually, lots of opportunities built in for talk. There's many different types of texts built into Fountas and Pinnell Classroom, so students get multiple opportunities to engage in different types of literature. And again, it comes all back to that instructional coherence. So each instructional context is really connected to the others. And you'll notice here that they're broken down to many of the ones that we explored today, but some of them also have an orange dot inside the box, and that's just to indicate that that's where phonics, that's where the phonics spelling and word study carries over into these other instructional contexts. So as I mentioned when we talked about that instructional context, there's an opportunity to provide an explicit mini lesson, but then for students to revisit the application of those mini lessons throughout the various contexts in Fountas and Pinnell Classroom. These are some of the professional learning tools, and I really just wanted to highlight these to make you aware of what are some of the key tools that they talk about within Fountas and Pinnell Classroom. Obviously, the continuum is that roadmap and that key piece, but the guided reading, we talked about it at the top of the webinar. The prompting guides, those can be found if you have leveled literacy intervention in your schools, and those are key because they really provide that facilitative talk to teach, scaffold and support and reinforce students' reading behaviors and understandings that we want them to have a good grasp on. So those are really handy tools. And then of course, we've already talked about the comprehensive phonics spelling and word study guide, kind of a companion piece to the literacy continuum. So these are some key professional learning tools. And again, it comes back to making sure that teachers feel supported as they work through the lessons in Fountas and Pinnell Classroom. If you are interested in supporting, looking at any instructional contexts in more detail, because I know I went through them fairly quickly today, just to kind of give you a brief overview of what makes up Fountas and Pinnell Classroom, we are offering some other webinars specific to the different instructional contexts. So if you are interested, Daniel can post the link in the chat, and you can jump on there and sign up for any of the webinars. Again, once you sign up, you will receive the recording, and you can go revisit any of those instructional contexts. So I encourage you to do that if there's an area that you'd really like to focus a little bit more on. If you are interested in the samplers, I know on the slides there was some kind of sample lessons. If you'd like to look at them in more detail, you can contact sales rep, and I'll put their contact information up in just a second. Or if you would like one of our sales reps to come to your school to look at the resources in more detail, you can contact them to do that. We do have some early adopter pricing on until the end of August. But one of the key things I would encourage you to do, if you haven't already done so, is to join the Fountas and Pinnell literacy community. It's free to join, and you just go on fountasanpinnell.com. There's lots of webinars on there by Fountas and Pinnell. They have daily lit bits. They have lots of study guide and support materials for their professional books, especially some of the ones I talked about today. And lots of great tools on there that you can access for free. So like I said, if you haven't joined, I would encourage you to join the Fountas and Pinnell community. I am, as you're thinking of any questions that you have, I am going to share, our contact info for our sales rep. So like I said, if you're interested in getting a sampler or looking more closely at some of the resources, you can reach out to one of them. If you're a district consultant, you can connect with the account executive or simply send an email to the connected sales rep that's on the screen in your area, and they will be able to connect you with the account executive that supports your school district. So as I leave that on the screen, just in case you need to take down any details, if there's any questions, I would love to address those at this time. If you have to jump off, please feel free to do that, and you will receive a recording of the webinar.
Thank you, Siobhan. We do have a question around how implementations work.
Okay, so implementation, so if you're looking at any instructional context, they are packaged individually. So if there's an area that you really want to focus on after you kind of, talk with your colleagues and think that, there's a certain need in a certain instructional context or a couple contexts, you can certainly reach out to us and we'd be happy to help you with that. And then implementing it. So once you purchase the resources, you actually get an access code for online resources. And if you've purchased anything Fountas and Pinnell before, you know that the resources sit on a web page. Once you go in there, if you have benchmark assessment, for example, or LLI, once you get your FPC code for the instructional context that you have, it'll direct you to the same website. So all of your materials are in the same space, which is nice. And once you go on there, there's a lot of support videos provided that you get access to when you purchase. There is also a complimentary course that you get. So there's discussion boards and so on there, and video clips and other sample lessons, 8 weeks at a glance, all those kinds of resources that can support you in implementation. And then through Pearson Canada, we also do offer some professional development. So if that's something you're thinking of, you can certainly reach out to your sales rep and they'll be able to connect you with myself. I'd be happy to help you out.
Okay, thank you, Siobhan.
Any other questions?
There are no other questions that are populating in the chat box at this moment. You've done a fantastic job explaining it, so it seems like there aren't any other questions popping up at this point. However, Siobhan and I will stick around for the next another 3 minutes or so until we hit the 45-minute mark. So if anybody does have any questions that they want to ask, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, looks like that's it for today.
Thanks for your time and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.